Hello and welcome to this Personnel Today webinar in association with Degreed. When, where and how we work is being totally transformed. Now more than ever, business leaders have a responsibility to refocus their workforce strategy on upskilling and talent mobility. Today, we're looking at how work is fundamentally changing as technology, automation and AI are increasingly incorporated into routine tasks. Many jobs are becoming unrecognizable or even redundant. And as new jobs are invented, they will inevitably evolve to include new skills and responsibilities. I'm Rob Moss, editor of Personnel Today, and today we're joined by two guest speakers who can help us navigate this topic. I'm delighted to welcome Kelly Palmer, Chief Learning Officer at Degreed, who is looking to change the way the world learns. Formerly Chief Learning Officer at LinkedIn, she is also co-author of the book, The Expertise Economy, which looks at how the smartest companies are using learning to engage, compete, and succeed. Kelly will discuss how people at all levels need to reimagine work, jobs, and careers, how companies can create the environment to support this, and how L&D professionals can replace old methods so their workforce stays agile. And our second speaker, Darren Bartlett, is going to provide a first-hand account of how this upskilling can be done. As Global Capability Director for Imperial Brands, Darren ensures the tobacco giant has the right capabilities and mindset to deliver its business strategy. Darren is responsible for entry-level talent, learning and leadership development, and is driving a digital and cultural shift to put learners across Imperial's global organization in control of their development. Kelly and Darren will be presenting for around 30 to 40 minutes, after which we will run a question and answer session that will take us to a finish time just before 3 o'clock. I urge you at any time to send in your questions and comments, and I will relay as many of these as possible to our speakers during the Q&A. After the webinar, do look out for an email from Degreed with a link to an on-demand version of today's webinar. Okay, I think that's all from me. So I'm going to hand over to Kelly, Degreed's Chief Learning Officer, Kelly Palmer. Over to you, Kelly.
Thanks so much, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm actually calling in from San Francisco. So good morning for anyone in my area, but good afternoon or evening to wherever you are. I'm thrilled to be here today because I really think it's so important to be talking about upskilling the workforce. And I would say that keeping people's skills in sync with the fast-changing markets is probably the biggest challenge of our time. And since we released our book, The Expertise Economy, my co-author and I have been talking a lot about the trends in the workforce and how learning has fundamentally changed, the importance of upskilling your workforce and how to create a talent marketplace. But as I've been speaking at companies and conferences around the world, what I realize is that now I think most people are familiar with those basic ideas, and what people are really wondering is, okay, if I realize I need to upskill or reskill my workforce, how do I actually do it? So what I'm hoping today is to share some actionable strategies to help you think about if you are in the middle of an upskilling strategy or if you're contemplating one, how might you approach that and what are the steps you can take? So I'm going to start by actually talking about exactly what is upskilling. And upskilling fundamentally is really about investing in your employees. You want employees to be continuously learning and building skills all the time. You want people to really be able to understand what their skill gaps are and then be able to get learning that helps them fill those gaps. And then maybe most importantly is helping people stay employable. And a lot of times you can do that through an internal career marketplace. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. That's a little bit different from reskilling, which is, I'd say a lot of people ask me, what's the difference between upskilling and reskilling? Upskilling is a lot about getting skills to help you get better at the job that you have in the industry that you're in. And reskilling, I believe, is a lot more about actually completely changing careers. Now, you might have transferable skills that you can take to a new career, but that's how I distinguish the two. So it's interesting because there has been a lot of talk about upskilling the workforce and the advantages that you get around upskilling the workforce, yet only in the most recent PwC CEO survey that they do every year, they asked how many companies and how many CEOs were actually embarking on an advanced upskilling program, and only 18% said that they were actually making significant progress in that area. And later on, I'll talk about what the advantages are for those companies who have done it. But first, let's dive into how you can create an advanced upskilling strategy or a simple upskilling strategy. And I think that the first thing that we really need to focus on is the fact that if you are we are all living in this dynamically changing world where the workforce is constantly changing, and sometimes companies are focused on these old work models, which isn't really a great way to think about upskilling. So let me talk a little bit about that. So old work models were really company focused. Companies would talk about what you need to learn, when you need to learn it. It was really, there's a lot of command and control around talent strategies and learning strategies. Also, the model was really about one size fits all, and we know through research that that's just not really very effective. Everybody needs some sort of personalized learning. We need to meet them where they are. Old work models also focus a lot on how efficient people can be and really trying to get an ROI around the money they're spending on particular programs. But it's really, I think now more than ever, we're seeing it's more about outcomes and it's more about employees creating value. The old work models have been traditionally very transactional, and that doesn't really fit with our world today. And we've seen that, I've been in a lot of the major companies in Silicon Valley, and most of the companies I've been in have been very, in the HR function, have been very disconnected. So, for example, talent acquisition doesn't talk a lot to the CLO or the learning organization and so forth. So that's one of the old models. But overall, I'd say that these old work models, being company-focused, really directing the employee what to do, have been somewhat antiquated and uninspiring, in my opinion. So how do we move to new work models? And I'd say that the key difference between the old work models and the new work models is really that the new work models are more about the employee. They're very individual focused, really wanting to understand and helping employees own their own personalized development. And a lot of us have been talking about that for a long time now. How do we actually help people own their own development? Well, you have to actually give up a little bit of that command and control and put employees in the driver's seat. It's also very important that employees start by knowing their strengths and what their critical skill gaps are. And you can do that in a variety of ways. We'll talk about that later. But also this idea that employees can learn and grow inside the company, because we know that two of the reasons people leave companies, first is because they don't like their manager, and secondly, they don't feel like they have opportunities to learn and grow within a company, so they feel like they have to leave in order to progress and learn. So this idea that once you actually learn the skills, that you could apply those new skills to projects and jobs within your company so that you can actually learn and grow, but you can actually build skills because you're applying the skills that you've actually learned. And then I think that if you look at that overall, what you'll find is if you transition to these new work models, you'll have employees that are more engaged and are able to create value through solving real business problems. Okay, so this idea of focusing on the individuals, and I think that this is a key mantra that we can think about. It's about understanding your skills, tying learning to those skills, and then tying those skills to opportunities. And that's the basic model we can look at. So if you think about that from an individual experience, what does the individual go through if we're focusing on them? I think there's the first step that we often skip in doing this. I mean, the old models talk about, okay, here's the learning that you need because we think that this is what you need. But really, it should start with the employees discovering what their career goals and what their purpose is, what they're trying to accomplish in their careers, because I think that gives them some direction. Of course, they need some guidance from the company, but really understanding that first step, I think, is key. And then, really understanding what, as an individual, what critical skills do I need for the future to either be successful in the job that I have today or to get ready for my career of the future. Next is about really embracing learning experiences to actually fill the skill gaps that you've identified. And then lastly, how can I apply those skills on the job? So like, how can I discover what jobs and projects that are in my company that can help me grow and develop and really progress in my career? And so with this, you get employees who are really motivated to learn, they're building transferable skills and engaged in work. So my favorite book right now is this book called 9 Lies About Work, Marcus Buckingham and Ashley Goodall from Cisco. And one of the reasons I love it so much is that they clearly say, look, if you're asking employees these 4 questions, that people know what's expected of them, they're recognized for work, their excellent work, that they're challenged to grow, and they're able to use their strengths every day at work. If people are answering those questions in a positive way, you're focusing on the individual, and you can say that things are going well. So you really need to understand the individual experience at work. So that doesn't mean that there's not value for the company. In fact, there's tremendous value for the company in creating an integrated and dynamic talent and skill strategy. And I'd say that the key word there is dynamic. In the past, if we think about old work models, a lot of what we've been trying to do it has in the talent industry has been not very dynamic because technology hadn't really caught up to where we actually wanted and needed to be. So imagine now that from a company perspective that you can understand what employees' career goals are, that you can understand what skills your employees need and how your company needs to succeed in the future, and really give employees guidance around that. But maybe most importantly is this idea that through technology that now there's this ability to dynamically get data and insights around what people are learning, what skills they're building. And because you can now get that data on skill progress, then you have this dynamic way to actually match people's skills with jobs and projects and stretch assignments within the company. And, technology is now making this possible. And so that's pretty incredible. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into a framework that I created about steps that you can take for upskilling your workforce. So if you're thinking, again, about creating a strategy, or if you're in the middle of the strategy, these are things to think about. And this is how I think about the steps. So first of all, I think it's really important that you identify future critical skills. And you can do that at the company level, at the organizational level, and at the individual level. So I'm working with a lot of companies that will say, look, we're going to pick 3 to 5 skills that we know at our company level are going to be really important for all of our employees, and we're going to give them guidance and say, this is where we're going, and this is, if you want to be successful at our company, these are the skills we think you might want to focus on. At the org level, so you think about it, if I'm in marketing or if I'm in engineering, if I'm in talent or finance, what are the most important skills that we need at the functional area? And again, identify those critical skills. There's so many, the problem with old models is competency models have traditionally been so complex, and there's so many competencies to focus on, people get overwhelmed. So just picking a few 3 to 5 at the organizational level, again, to give guidance to employees, I think is incredibly important. Then lastly, at the individual level, this goes back to as people are thinking about their career goals and dreams, what skills gaps might they have given where they think they want to go in their career. So that first step is really about identifying future skills. The next part is about really assessing. So once you know what skills you know are important, how do you assess those skills? And you can do those assess in a variety of ways through assessments. At Degreed, we have 3 levels of rigor in order to measure where you are in a particular skill. But what that does is it gives you a place to start, a baseline for knowing where you're going and be able to measure progress, again, either at the company, org, or individual level. The third step is about setting upskilling goals. And as I mentioned before, it's really important not to overwhelm people. Think about it for yourself. I mean, how many skills can you really focus on building at any one time? So I'd say for individuals, it's really important. They have career conversations with their managers. They pick a couple of goals that they're going to focus on in terms of these are the skills I want to focus on. And again, you can then at the company level, the org level, or the individual level, figure out, what those goals are. For example, one of the companies I'm working with just at the company level picked one skill. They said, we're going to focus on data science. And so that's where we're going. That's where we need the most people that have those skills. So we're going to put a program around that. Then you might have an organization who says, marketing, for example, that, we really need 25% of our employees to learn data analytics or more about how to create a powerful brand. And then again, you have the individual goals where an individual might say, look, I'm going to focus on artificial intelligence, and that's going to be my goal. So out of that, you can, pick 1 or 2 skills that you're going to focus on for your goals. The next part is really important. You're going to, at this point, match the skills to learning, and you can do that in a variety of ways. And I talk about designing learning experiences. Like if you are a learning professional, at this point, this is where you're actually going to want to design those learning experiences to help people upskill in particular areas that are really important. For the individual, that might mean that they go online, they get curated content around particular top skills that they're focused on. They might see virtual team-based programs and peer-to-peer programs that they want to engage in, but building skills is about finding blended learning. Some of it will be digital online, some of it will be virtual and team-based, but it will be a variety of learning experiences that will help people actually build those skills. The next step is actually about saying, okay, how are we doing? How do we measure the skill progress and how we're actually doing and building those skills? So you can have a metrics dashboard and showing, look, we had a goal. I gave you the example earlier of the one company who said, look, we're gonna upskill, 5,000 people in data science. Here's where they started. Here's where we're doing. We're showing metrics around just skill progress at this point. And there's a way, we can get signals from a variety of sources. I mentioned, Degreed has 3 ways to measure skill progress, but there's also other signals in the industry around badging, around credentialing, around, edX and nano degrees. You can get Pluralsight has a skills IQ. And again, technology is allowing us to bring all of those signals in so that you don't have to search for them everywhere, that they're actually brought into your skill plan, and you can see how people are progressing with their skills from a variety of sources based on what they learned. The next piece I think is so exciting and so important, this idea that once you build skills, you actually need a way to apply those skills. And if you don't apply the skills that you actually learned, you won't be able to get better at that skill. So that's a key point to doing that. So how do you apply skills? So you can apply them. So there's a variety of opportunities. Applying skills to opportunities could include, giving your employees stretch assignments, or employees going out and asking for stretch assignments. Hey, I just learned this new skill. I'd love to work on this project and actually apply those skills. New projects that they see popping up either in their own department or in other parts of the company. And a lot of companies that we're working with are actually saying, look, we're creating a way for people to have career mobility within the company and creating an internal career marketplace. So even new jobs in the company are listed, and employees can get matched with some of those new jobs and projects, or managers can say, look, I'm looking for somebody with these skills, and here are the employees that actually have those skills or who have been building them. So this is a really, really important step. And then lastly, you're going to want to show metrics of success. And here, the difference between Step 5 and Step 7. In Step 5, you're actually measuring specific skill progress based on the upskilling goals that you had. But ultimately, what you want is you want to show the business, the whole company, look, upskilling is incredibly valuable to our company. We need talent with the right skills to help our business move forward. And so this idea that you can create dash metrics for the business to communicate, hey, what is the impact that we're having based on these upskilling programs? It could be metrics around, hey, we're creating a stronger company culture. We're actually being able to innovate faster. We're able to accelerate our digital transformation. You can also show the number of people that are growing in their careers within the company. Here's the percentage of people who have actually found new projects and new jobs and opportunities. So this can really show, how your upskilling program is impacting the business. And this is something your business leaders and your CEO should be incredibly interested in. And so if I were to show you the whole model, these are the 7 steps for upskilling your workforce. And so, what I believe around, taking these simple steps is that actually they're simple, yet, they're so important, and they can be, each step we could probably spend another half hour or hour on each one just to dive into it. But this will give you a framework by which to think about how you're doing that. And the results are really incredible. So going back to the PwC CEO survey, where they asked the question, how many of your companies are actually making significant progress on your upskilling strategies? We saw earlier that's only 18% that are actually doing that. However, those companies that are actually focusing on an advanced upskilling strategy are seeing amazing benefits. They are seeing stronger company culture. They are seeing employee engagement, which you can measure with the data and analytics. I think that something that excites a lot of business leaders is this idea that, and I think everybody in the company, we're all striving for innovation, and most companies around the world are going through some sort of digital transformation. So imagine that you can increase innovation, and whatever digital transformation you're going through is actually getting accelerated. That's pretty powerful. And then lastly, this idea that you can attract and retain talent, because ultimately it's about helping people grow in their careers, stay loyal to your company and to your brand, and feel like they have an opportunity to actually learn and grow their careers within their company. And so I'm going to end this with just a few ideas. If you're thinking about an advanced upskilling strategy, or you are working on one, imagine your future workforce. The future workforce is about people creating value. So if you embark on this, you're going to have employees that are more skilled, more engaged, and creating more value. And ultimately, that's what we're all after. So I'm thrilled to be here today. You can follow me on Degreed. I'm Kelly at Degreed.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it back over to Rob. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kelly. That was really interesting and some really practical advice there for our audience to take away. A quick reminder to everybody that you can send in questions and comments as we go along, and we'll include as many of those in the Q&A as possible. A few of you are asking about whether slides will be made available. You will receive an email from Degreed with access to a recording of today's webinar. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Darren Bartlett, Global Capability Director at Imperial Brands. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it's really early for you, so hopefully you've got a coffee there. It's afternoon for me in Twickenham in southwest London. So I'm not too sure how I'm going to follow Kelly, to be honest, because I probably would have wanted to spend another half an hour listening to her. But what I wanted to share with you was how we've really embraced a learning culture as an organisation and how that's transformed over the last 4 to 5 years. And critically, our partnership with Degreed has really helped us to kick that on over the last 12 to 18 months. But I think, and I've had this conversation with the guys at Degreed before, I think if you start off looking about how technology is going to solve your problem, you're probably doomed to failure. You need to understand what your problem is first, what your needs are. And very much, I think, as Kelly outlined and her steps there, around how do you really understand where you can add value, both for the individual and the organisation. So I wanted to take you on a bit of a story over what's happened at Imperial over the last sort of 4 to 5 years. So as Rob kindly said, my role now is the Global Capability Director for Imperial. Simply speaking, that means I look after everything from attraction, selection, onboarding, learning, development, leadership, talent, engagement, diversity. I don't do the difficult stuff like paying people and moving people around the world. That's far too complicated. But when I first went to Imperial 5 years ago, my role was to really help transform the training culture. And I think what was quite interesting, Kelly sort of talked about the old work model. I don't think we were even at the old work model. We were very much a very disjointed training culture. And some of the slides here were from my first executive meeting back in May 2015, which was based on some early findings. So we had, on paper, a really high investment per head, but there was a real question around the value, both for the individual and for the organisation, as Kelly referred to. We had a field force academy that we were incredibly proud of, but 44 of those modules, i.e. all of them, were designed to be face-to-face, which meant that we constantly were taking people off of the road. We had, that we knew of, over 700 suppliers, but we only spent 50k or more with about 8% of them. So we had a huge tail. We had a huge inconsistency in terms of our supply base, and we had no real view around their quality. And quite often, actually, what we were finding was when we started to talk to the various HR directors around the world, because we operate in over 160 markets, that we actually probably had the same solution in place about 5 times over, with 5 different suppliers, with 5 different frameworks, with 5 different cost models. I think you probably get the idea. We had an unknown amount of FTE dedicated to learning back in those days, and again, no real consistency around how they were operating. We didn't have any consistent processes, so despite all of those multiple approaches, we didn't have any consistent level 1 evaluation. And 58% of our spend was being, or that we could at least identify, was actually being spent without any clear visibility centrally. So what I heard from people very much was, e-learning won't work here. We're fine just working in our function. And learning, you've got to be a top leader for that. And that was very much sort of reflected in the fact that the only people who felt they had a learning experience was our senior leaders who were able to have those opportunities to invest in themselves and really take time to sort of think about their future career. For everyone else, it was very much a training culture focused on systems and processes, and you were told what you could have, where you could have it, when you could have it, why you could have it. So very much going into what Kelly was talking about in terms of wanting to invest in our employees and really invest in their careers, that wasn't something that we had in place at the time. So we had to really go back to basics. And I appreciate some of these slides are a bit small, but hopefully you get sort of the sense of we operated very much on a 3-year window to start with. And it was very much around first year was getting the basics right. We started to do that in 3 ways. We wanted to try and put some governance in place, so simplify and standardize our various approaches. We really wanted to focus in on how the learning community works, so our operating model. But then most importantly, really understanding what does learning mean for me, and really putting our learners at the heart of everything we do, which is why they were central to our what has now been known as Sunshine in College and Imperial. And for those of you who are a certain age and from a UK perspective, you might remember back in the 70s there was an advert with Joan Collins around so anytime, any place, anywhere, and that was very much our motto. We wanted people to be able to access learning that they wanted, where they wanted it, when they wanted it, and how they wanted it. Clearly was then taking more from a training to do, providing a learning framework that actually helped build your career. So that was our first step where we said that. We have to go back to the basics. So whilst, as I say, I'm going to come to the technology piece, these are some of the challenges that I think we had to face into. And I guess in terms of sort of being in this industry from a learning and development perspective for over 20 years, I've made far more mistakes than I've got right. So I was able to really go back and start to think about how do we get some of that consistency. So we had to almost go all the way back to the beginning and say, right, what are the different types of learning that you can have out there? Where could you look for those opportunities? How did we actually want people to learn? Going back to trying to overcome some of those challenges that I heard from the general managers and the HR directors around why it had to be face and nothing else would work. And then really starting to break that down into a very structured approach for our business overall. So fundamentally, I guess probably the first things that I was recognizing was it wasn't so much about the infrastructure that we had to change. It was much more around the mindset. We had a very fixed mindset around what did training mean and what its purpose was there for. And again, I think going back to sort of Kelly's value piece and really investing in our employees, we were a long way away from that. So first sort of 3 years, we were pretty successful. I think we got to a space where we did address a lot of those inconsistencies that we had globally. We got to a place where we did have a global approach for learning. We had a global portal in place, so all of our people could find the content in one place for the first time. We introduced a global leadership framework with some leadership expectations or a behavioural model that applied to everyone across the organisation. And that was consistent whether you were a sales rep or working in our manufacturing shop floor all the way through to our C-suite. And that really helped us in terms of, I think, changing the mindsets of our business leaders around how, by making some simple changes, you could start to really drive business value. So we were able to reduce our cost per learning hour from close to £100 to £10 an hour, whilst at the same time we drove consumption from less than 20,000 learning hours per year to well over 80,000 learning hours per year. So it was really starting to shift that. And what I'd like to do is, rather than sort of you hear from me, I'll give you a break for a few minutes. And we're going to show a video which really sort of you get a chance to hear from my team who did all of the hard work to make those first 3 years so successful. So if we can run the VT, please.
How do you transform a 230-year-old institution whose products and culture has gone almost unchanged in over a century? By igniting the people capability agenda to create an agile, innovation-hungry market leader. Imperial Brands is a large and complex global organisation built up through acquisition, with people in some 40 countries, each with its own culture and ways of working. Initiatives from our UK head office had not been well adopted across the organisation, often seen as missing the mark and unhelpfully described as coming from Planet Bristol. This was exactly the challenge facing the Imperial Brands learning team, With the business transforming to develop the next generation of products, needing new skills and talent, we had to shift the capability culture. Moving from training to a culture of learning, from fragmented face-to-face delivery for the privileged few, to a learning for all access approach for the always-on global workforce. Changing the e-learning won't work here mindset to using just-in-time learning as a must in day-to-day business. From no consistent view on quality, spend and so value globally to having an efficient central offer with local adaptation and adoption. By understanding the direction the organisation needed to go and the requirements we would need for our people to ensure our future success, we were able to combine our learning aspirations with commercial outcomes that made a difference to our people and so our results. What did we do? We listened to the needs of our senior stakeholders and employees across the organisation. We looked at best practice externally. We activated a campaign to engage our people in a new set of globally consistent actions and behaviours, our leadership expectations, described by our CEO as instrumental in turning our values into results. We engaged our HR community and business leaders to embed and support our change through a regular drumbeat of toolkits, webinars, sharing of best practices and lessons learned. We built from scratch leadership content in 10 languages so leaders could access the knowledge they needed whenever they needed it. We built programs of leadership development so our leaders in any market or language could practice and learn from each other in a safe environment. We created an online matching website for mentors and mentees across all levels of the business to meet, now operating globally. We streamlined our suppliers so we could focus on cost-effective, globally scalable solutions. We've created resources to develop key business initiatives, from lean manufacturing, our Salesforce capability, our next generation products, knowledge and skills, to an online portal bringing our strategy to life. We've built skills for the business to use today and prepare us to meet tomorrow's challenges. Our one-stop shop for learning has been constantly evolving to keep ahead of the business and so the development needs. This hasn't been easy, and we've tested and learned different approaches along the way as we've driven the capability agenda over the last 3 years. Our success can be measured by the global take-up of our learning solutions, the stories of success our people are sharing, the results we're seeing from the leaders who are working together in a different way, and the cost savings and efficiencies we're capturing by our new ways of working. The behavioural changes we see when we review performance with our people one-to-one and our individual successes is incrementally adding value across the organisation to deliver significant global results. Building capability is now seen as integral in the business success, so much so the word capability is at the centre of our business strategy to deliver growth and innovation. But we're not just satisfied with where we are now, we recognise there are challenges still to come. We're implementing short engagement pulse surveys more frequently to keep in touch with the word on the streets from our people. We're implementing a new learner experience platform to engage our always-on learners with a mobile-enabled platform that involves them in sharing their learning in communities. We're passionate about the transformation we've pioneered with our people across Imperial brands globally and the impact it's having for our business. We know we're creating something better.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you more of a story around what we've gone through over Imperial over the last few years. And I appreciate that there's been some issues with audio from my end, which I do apologise for. That is always the way with tech. It seemed to be okay when we were doing rehearsals, but hopefully that would have given you enough of an overview around what we've been going through. As we talked about in the program, we refer to Degreed internally as I Learn. And this is kind of where I just wanted to finish up my message before we then open up for some questions. Is we've worked really hard to try and understand what the business problems were, where the business direction was going, and really set the framework in place to ensure that our people were engaged with wanting to actually further their careers and making a difference. We tried to put a simple framework in place, so we talk about 3 ways that we drive capability through how we attract people, how we develop, and how we accelerate. And Degreed, or I Learn, as I say, we refer to it, has been integral across all 3 of those areas within our business. And we've started to try and really share those successes with our business. So again, as Kelly sort of referred to, I think talking in data is so particularly critical when engaging with business leaders and being able to show to them the difference that it is making, be that in terms of our speed to onboard people and get them up to speed, through supporting our ongoing leadership and talent initiatives, but more importantly, providing that framework for all of our people to be able to learn and develop their careers wherever they are. And it's become particularly relevant over the last 2 to 3 months where we've been in a lockdown scenario. So we had an 18% increase on April on March in terms of the amount of learning hours that was consumed. And the fact that we'd invested in the global infrastructure through Degreed, meaning that our people could access the content from wherever they were and indeed using their own devices, has really helped drive that learning culture that we're now seeing prevalent across the organisation. We've also seen more and more people return to iLearn on a basis. Now, whilst we have seen a slight dip in May, as we've started to see a number of our sales teams go back out into the roads, we're still far in advance of where we were before we actually entered into lockdown. So again, testament, I think, to the flexibility and the quality of Degreed as a platform that's really helped us drive that change. And again, through the ability to be able to search for the skills and search for the content, as Kelly was referring to, we've really been able to see an increase in how our people are using iLearn, not just in terms of from a content point of view, but also to collaborate and build their community. And that's been validated in our recent global engagement survey, where the quality and the commitment to our people's learning and their career development was recognised within the top 10 factors that keeps people at the organisation. So, as I said at the very beginning, technology can always help, but you have to be clear around the problem that you're trying to solve within the first place. If you don't have that, then clearly you're going to have an issue and you're just going to be investing in technology, taking up valuable organisation time, but without real clarity around where do you want to go. So I hope that's been useful for you. I'm going to hand back now to Rob, I think, who's going to manage some of the questions. But thank you very much for your time. Apologies again for the audio quality. I promise I haven't been walking around, and I will hopefully get to speak to you again shortly.
Thank you very much, Dan. Yeah, the audio quality wasn't too bad. It was just an issue for a minute or so where you're just dipping in and out. But I heard everything you had to say. So thank you very much, and an interesting video as well. We're now going to turn to the Q&A. We've got about 10 minutes left, but you can carry on submitting your questions like many of you have done already. Okay, let's have a look. I'm just going to choose out some of the best ones from my perspective, but Kelly and Darren, if you see any that you're particularly keen to answer, then do flag them up, and I will read them out for the audience. One that I thought was good, you mentioned it a couple of times, Kelly, in your presentation, the 3 ways that Degreed measures skills progress. So I just wonder if you could enlighten us a bit more on that.
Sure, I'd love to elaborate on that. So we do have 3 levels of skill rigor in the product. And the first one is called self-assessment. And the second one is skill review. And the third one is skill certification. And I'll briefly run through each one of those. So self-assessment is exactly as it sounds. It's we actually use the Lumina Foundation rubric for skills. Lumina Foundation is a nonprofit organization, but a lot of companies around the world use to assess skills. So we were trying to go with an industry standard. They have skills from levels 1 through 8. And so self-assessment is about saying, I'm going to assess myself in a particular skill, but you also with self-assessment get the ability to ask a peer or ask your manager to give you an assessment. But it is just your sense of where you are on skill, levels 1 through 8. And so it's very quick. The second level of skill assessment is called skill review. And it takes about, I'd say, 15 to 20 minutes, but it goes more in depth about having you explain why, what have you done, what have you contributed to actually determine that you're at that level of skill. So, for example, if you think you're a certain level on presentation skills, you might add during skill review that I've given presentations at these conferences and I've gotten these, scores afterwards around how well I did, for example. Then the third level of skill rigor is the most rigorous, which is called skill certification. It's actually more involved, and we have a proprietary algorithm on the back end that actually compares you to others in the same skill. You're still providing data about your what you've contributed in order to say you've demonstrated that skill, but then you get peer feedback as well. So, it's really interesting because a lot of our companies choose levels of rigor based on what they're trying to do. We have one company who said, you know what, our engineers are never going to do anything that takes too long, so we're just going to go with self-assessment. We have other companies that are saying, self-assessment isn't quite rigorous enough. I would love people to do skill review. And then we have other companies who say, no, we really want our employees to go through the certification process for certain skills, and so we want to use that. So it really depends on your goals and your company culture, what level you would do. And then I also mentioned that we will bring in to Degreed other signals. So again, if you've got technical people who have gone through Skills IQ in Pluralsight, we'll bring that data over too, so you have more than one signal. They could do a skill review in Degreed. They could have the skill IQ measurement. They might have a badge from or a nano degree from edX. We'll bring all of that data in so that you can best validate people's skills. And one last thing I'll say about this is that through our research, since we've had these levels out, interestingly enough, the self-assessment actually tends to be pretty accurate. So that's good data to have. And I think that's it for me, Rob, on that question.
Thank you, Kelly. That's great. So, Darren, you mentioned the impact over the last few weeks, given the COVID-19 pandemic and how that was affecting the reaction and the demand for learning. Has there been any difference in behaviour? And then I've got a follow-up question for Kelly on this topic as well. But Darren, over to you firstly. Have you seen any change in behaviour?
I think probably the biggest change that we've seen is people are more comfortable now with the concept of learning in the flow of work, and I think that's really where Degreed has been such a critical partner for us. I think historically, with that old training culture in mind, you were told when you could have training and where and why, whereas I think now where people are more having to sort of direct themselves, lead themselves, I think they're making decisions that it's okay to spend time investing in themselves and learning. I think in terms of from a future point of view, that's only going to magnify. I don't think we can ever go back to where we were historically. And similarly, I think we're seeing a pull from different parts of our business where historically we may not have had that. So our factory employees really want us to make sure that we can enable their own devices. Now, again, in some markets, that could have quite an impact on the individuals. So from the CSR point of view, we're looking at how can we address that. But yeah, I think that's just going to be the normal in the future. And I think if you're not prepared to offer solutions that helps the employee in everything they do, then I think you will lose them, and that will lose your competitive advantage.
Thank you, Darren. So this is a related question. It comes from Tiara, who works, by the looks of it, in the hospitality industry. My question to Kelly is, being with the lack of opportunities to progress, a key factor for employees to leave a company, essentially she's saying, with the lack of opportunities, I guess, in an industry such as hospitality, given the coronavirus pandemic, do you have any advice or ideas on what strategies they can employ to upskill and reskill people on a limited budget, but we're also with a limited number of roles for people to go to? Well, what can they do, perhaps, Kelly, to retain their key talents?
Yeah, I think that this is a really good point and really relevant for what's going on with us right now. And what I would say is there are two things. One is you can look at Amazon as an example, and I think a lot of companies are going through a similar situation where they're actually upskilling some of their workforce, but realizing, for example, manufacturing jobs like hospitality jobs, maybe there aren't going to be as many of them moving forward, and we need to help people think about what they want to do next if some of those jobs are going to go away. And oftentimes it's not the whole job that goes away. It's oftentimes part of the job that goes away. So many company strategies are saying, look, we're going to help upskill or reskill our people. In this case, maybe reskill to different areas based on where we see skills and jobs most in demand. So for manufacturing jobs that are going away or hospitality jobs that are going away, there's lists of industries that are actually growing in demand. So I think first of all, identify what those future skills are. And I saw that there were a lot of questions in the Q&A section about how to identify those critical skills. And I'd say, there are several ways you can do that, but identify the critical skills. And then because there's so much content out there, a lot of it is free. If you don't have a big budget, a lot of the resources are low cost or no cost. And so you can actually provide access to employees that way. So that they can actually reskill. But I think it's identifying, like, where do you want to go? What are your goals? And then you can tie the low cost, no cost resources to that. And then I think the other part of it is, the question, how do you actually identify critical skills or critical roles or critical jobs? There's a lot of research that's out right now about industries because of automation, digitization, acceleration, a lot of jobs that are going away and a lot of industries where there are going to be more jobs. I mean, for people in the learning and development and talent fields, we're lucky because we continue to be in demand, but there are new skills that you need to learn through those. Healthcare is an area, where we still see, more people needing to go in there and so forth. So there's a lot of research about what fields are going to be important moving forward. If you're internally and you're trying to figure out what are the most important skills for your company, the people I've worked with, the CLOs, the talent leaders, the CHROs, what they're doing is actually partnering with the CEOs. They're partnering with their business leaders. What I've done at Degreed is the same thing. We're creating an upskilling program. We're in the process of that for our sales organization. So what I've done is I've talked to our head of sales. I've talked to our regional heads and some of the people in the sales organization and asked them, let's figure out what are the most important skills given our company goals and where we think we're going in the future. What are the most important skills for our organization moving forward? Give our employees guidance, and then and you can do that for every functional area. So it's about getting the business involved, the business leaders. Talent is the business, so it's about partnership, getting everybody involved. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Kelly. I think we've got time for maybe just one more question. It relates to something that came up in Kelly's presentation, but the question is for Darren. Jonathan asked an insight into your metrics is that a lot of them are married to talent acquisition and HR and the retention. I think Jonathan's looking for you to just explain a bit about the relationships you have with other groups in the company, whether it's recruitment, whether it's core HR, whether it's other departments entirely, in terms of how the learning strategy works across the organisation, Dan?
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's a really good question. I suppose partly, Jonathan, it's because certainly from an attraction point of view, and then also engagement and our broader diversity and inclusion agenda all sits within my world anyway. So in terms of being able to have oversight and make some of those correlations, it's particularly easy, which was one of the slides I showed briefly around our capability model of attract, develop, and accelerate, because I think you have to think about it in terms of sort of the employee experience and how do you connect it through. I'm also lucky in that I work really closely with the rest of my HR exec colleagues globally, and we have a very close relationship with our HR operations team. We use Workday as our global HR system. So again, in terms of being able to work with them, extrapolate data, correlate, it's a very easy process. But I think that's probably credit to the individuals. And again, a bit like Kelly saying, if we had more time, I'd love to sort of talk to you about that HR transformation overall, because obviously just the learning part was a chapter of it. But yeah, it does take time, and I think it's being very mindful about being clear around what is the problem you're trying to solve, and then honing in on those metrics and being able to then tell that story. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for answering that question. That is all we have time for now. Thank you to everyone who submitted their questions, and apologies if we didn't have time to get to yours. If you do have further questions for Kelly or Dan, their email addresses are on the screen at the moment, as is the email address for Degreed sales team. We've webinars coming up on Personnel Today in the coming weeks, including how HR strategy is being affected by the coronavirus more generally. Degreed will be in touch with a recording of today's webinar for you to watch again or for you to share with colleagues. It just leaves me to thank our speakers for their time and expertise today. Dan and Kelly, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here today and co-presenting with my colleague Darren.
Thank you both. You've been listening to a Personnel Today webinar in association with Degreed. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye. Thank you.